Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to start with some opening prayers. There's a link right below the video, and you can just open up the opening prayers and follow along. So this first prayer we'll do 3 times, and the subsequent prayers we'll do 1 time each. Om Organ yogi numjan sampamage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngorupne pemajung ne jesurak kordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu dak drupki jinji lop chia shek su so guru pelma city home. Organ yogi numjan sam pemage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngodrupne pemajung ne jesurak kordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu dak drupki jinji lop chia shek su so guru pelma city home. Organ yogi numjan sam pemage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngodrupne pemajung ne jesurak kordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu dak drupki jinji lop chia shek su so guru pelma city home. Kunsan dosem garab shiri sing pema kara jipani shunga sosa nimna teten katsa so kate lama namla so wadem. Ogmin chuki yinki podrana dusum sange kungi ngobonyet rangsem chuku ngutsun tonset pe tawe lama namla so wadem. Sashi pochu chuching me do cham ri rab ning jini de kempadi sange zing du mig de po wai joku nam da shing la chu parshok tram guru ratna mandala putta mega samudra saparana samaya hom. Semchen namki sampadang loyi je jag jitawa je chon tomon tepai choki korlo kordu so. All right, so let's take a moment to connect with our compassionate intention for attending this class today. We are here so that we can learn how to be more present and compassionate for the benefit of all beings. We're not just here to be entertained and watch TV. We're here because we want to learn how to be more helpful to others. So let's just take a moment to generate your compassionate intention. We're going to start today with a short meditation on our breath. So meditation is the natural state of mind when it is relaxed, stable, and open. And when our mind is calm and settled, there is a spaciousness that allows time between action and reaction. Our minds are rarely calm and settled like this. Our minds are usually more running wild like monkeys and chasing every thought that comes along, chasing every emotion that comes along, and especially chasing hatred, greed, and ignorance, and jealousy and pride, and all sorts of afflictive emotions. When our mind's too agitated, wound up, and out of control, our mind controls us instead of the other way around. This is where meditation comes in. The point of meditation is to create space in the mind. The mind is like a muscle, and in the same way that you work out to keep your body strong, the mind needs to be trained to be calm and relaxed, yet also alert and wakeful. It's kind of like tuning a guitar or a stringed instrument, where you don't want the strings too tight, or you're going to break a string when you play it, and you don't want them too loose, or the sound's just going to be flat. So you need it to be tuned just right, calm and relaxed, yet also alert and wakeful. Creating space in the mind also helps us to balance our emotions. So normally when our minds are so busy and distracted all the time, there isn't much space for compassion to arise. And if we want to generate bodhicitta, the awakened mind of wisdom and compassion, and the desire to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, if we're going to really generate that intention, that compassionate intention, and keep it alive long enough to really act on it, then we need to calm the winds of our minds and calm the winds of our distracting emotions. Because if you have a thought of compassion and it lasts for 0.2 seconds, and then you're on to thinking about lunch or something someone said to you last week and what you could say back to them, you've already forgotten your compassionate intention. So you're not going to get very far if you're constantly distracted by, just all this afflictive stuff going on in your head. So it's very important that we first calm our minds, and that creates a stable ground with which we can generate compassion, we can generate wisdom, and we can start going into some of the other spiritual practices, such as deity visualization. So we're going to sit comfortably with your back straight. You can sit in a cross-legged position or in a chair. There are benefits to sitting cross-legged, especially in lotus posture, but that's okay. Us Americans, especially, I think, are not used to sitting on the ground. So if a chair is what's comfortable for you, go for it. However you're sitting, try and have a straight back. And in order to stabilize the mind, it's important to sit very still. So find a position in which you can be comfortable sitting up with a straight back, in which you can be still for the next few minutes. If your clothing's tight, you might want to loosen it. Just be comfortable. We're going to place our hands on our lap, gently relaxed. Traditionally, we hold the right hand and the left hand with the thumbs touching to hold hands up to fit them on the screen. You can kind of have your hands in that position and put your hands below your navel, gently, just gently below your navel. Otherwise, you can just rest your hands on your knees or on your legs. But either way, just make sure to have a straight back, straight neck. Your shoulders are open. You're not collapsing in on yourself. Just open and awake and relaxed and comfortable. In our tradition, we meditate with our eyes slightly open. So just follow the line of your nose downwards and find a spot in front of you to rest your eyes. If you start getting sleepy while you're meditating, you can raise your gaze a little bit and look up a little bit more. And if you're getting too wound up in your head, you can lower your gaze a little bit. That will help to keep you more focused. And then place the tip of your tongue gently behind your teeth, kind of right behind your front teeth, just touching the top of your mouth. Very gently. And you're going to have your mouth just a little bit open. All right, so tell yourself to breathe normally. Just however your normal breath is. If you want to, take a deep breath first. You can let out some of that tension that you have. You need to roll your shoulders a little bit to get the tension out. That's okay. Get comfortable, because once you start meditating, you're going to sit still. So just breathe naturally and put the most gossamer thin attention on your breath. Really thin, really gossamer thin attention on your breath. It's not 100% of your attention. It's more like 80% of your attention. You're still aware of everything that's going on around you, but your focus is on your breath. Your focus is almost like a little feather gently riding on the surface of your breath. It's like taking your pulse. You don't put any pressure on it. You don't try to change your breath in any way. Just gently observe it. Just very gently keep that gossamer thin attention riding on the pulse of your breath. And you're going to think of all sorts of thoughts while you meditate. All sorts of thoughts are going to come by, but that's okay. Just let them pass on by. Our thoughts can be like pedestrians walking past our house. There's no need to invite them in for tea. You don't need to invite them in and sit them down and talk to them. Just let them walk by your window. They just walk by. So no matter what captures your attention, just bring it back to your breath. Just bring it back to that gossamer thin attention on your breath. You have a thought, you start going off down the road. As soon as you recognize that you've forgotten your breath, just drop it and return to it. You don't have to look at your thoughts. You don't have to see if it's a good thought or a bad thought. Are you a good girl or a bad girl, or are you a horrible person, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what thoughts come through your head. If you find yourself distracted from your breath, just drop it. Come back to your breath again and again and again. We're going to go for 5 minutes. Keeping our gossamer thin attention on our breath. Today, I want to talk about women in Buddhism. I wanted to do this today because tomorrow is an auspicious occasion. Tomorrow is the birthday of Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo, the first Western woman to be recognized as a reincarnate Lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. She's also my mother, just full disclosure. So this year, Jetsunma's birthday falls on Dakini Day. And Dakinis are the female embodiment of enlightened energy. And Dakini Day is celebrated on the 25th day of each lunar month in the Tibetan calendar. So this year, Jetsunma, who's a Dakini, her birthday is falling on Dakini Day, and that's kind of special. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, we are going to have a Yumka soak, which is traditionally we do a Yumka soak on Dakini Day. And we'll be doing that and also empowering the new Lady Liberty statue at our Maryland temple. Due to the coronavirus, only those directly involved with the soak are permitted to attend in person, but we will be broadcasting the event on Facebook Live, so I really hope that you all will join us. So sometimes people complain that Buddhism is very male-centric, and it can definitely seem that way sometimes. We mostly see male teachers, male throne holders, male lineage holders. Even most of our statues are male. Or when you see a statue with both the male and female present, the male is usually the larger figure as the focal point in the statue. So it does seem like there is an emphasis on maleness. And some people complain, where are the women in Buddhism? And the answer is they are literally everywhere, everywhere. I think one of the reasons that people don't notice the feminine presence in Buddhism is because of, I think it's second wave feminism, kind of a lingering second wave feminism mindset. Second wave feminism had a focus on women gaining the same status as men. Men were still held as the norm, and the game was anything a man can do, a woman can do too. So women can wear pantsuits, and women can run businesses, and women can do traditionally male jobs. Women can be mechanics and plumbers and lawyers and judges. But this mindset still requires one to hold the male as the norm or ideal, right? There's still an emphasis on women's work and traditionally female qualities being unappreciated or undesirable. It's okay for women to want a seat at the round table and to be a knight in shining armor and want to be like the big important men, but it's not okay for men to want to be stay-at-home dads or beauticians or be in touch with their emotions. So you can see even in that quest for equality, there was really an implicit bias towards inequality and an undervaluing of femininity in itself, even while trying to uphold the feminine qualities. There is still just an unappreciation of it, a lack of appreciation of those qualities on their own. So nowadays, feminism is geared more towards changing that mindset, recognizing that all people have both male and female qualities, and if we only uphold the male qualities, we're really limiting ourselves. We need to allow the feminine to exist as it is and appreciate it for what it is, rather than contorting it to take on a male appearance. There's more to being a woman than just, like, success as a woman is not just being a man. That's like, come on. Women have their own strengths. So right now there's so much misogyny in the world, and there always has been, but I think lately it seems kind of like a zit is being popped, and all of the ugly stuff is really spilling out very obviously, very loudly on the news. We have all these new phrases, all these new terms for it now. There's eco-misogyny and trans-misogyny and misogynoir, and just so many different categories of hatred toward women or hatred of femininity, hatred of those feminine qualities. We can push back against that tide of hate by recognizing our own implicit biases and by honoring the feminine in ourselves and in our world, and especially by recognizing and honoring the Dakini, which is the female embodiment of enlightened energy. The female Buddha, Tara, is a fully enlightened Buddha who can be understood at both the relative and the ultimate levels. In her relative aspect, her story is a familiar one because on her path to enlightenment, she faced the same misogyny and sexism that so many other women do when they take charge of their own lives. So many aeons ago, there was a princess named Yeshe Dawa, or Moon of Primordial Wisdom. She had tremendous devotion to the Buddha of that era, and through her devotion, she gave rise to the thought of bodhicitta, the desire to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. She vowed to become enlightened for the benefit of all the boundless beings who suffered in samsara, or cyclic existence. But the religious leaders of that time believed that it was only possible to become enlightened in a male body. So they told her that she should pray to be reborn as a man. And instead, Princess Yeshe Dawa said, no thanks. And she vowed to attain enlightenment and carry out all her enlightened activities in the past, present, and future in female form. And the reason why is that she wanted everyone to know that everyone can attain enlightenment. You don't have to be a man to attain enlightenment. You can be a woman, you can be trans, you can be any gender there is. You can be anything, and you can attain enlightenment. It doesn't matter what your race or nationality or sexual orientation is or anything. You can attain enlightenment. And so Tara chose to always appear in female form because the female form is often looked down upon and not appreciated, not seen as being equal, not seen as having the same agency as male forms. And so she chose to always take that form as a reminder that absolutely anyone can attain enlightenment. Eventually, she became a completely enlightened Buddha and became known as Tara. And Khenpo Palden Sherab says, at the ultimate level of wisdom, there is no distinction of male and female. At the relative conceptual level, however, these distinctions are considered to be significant. Each type of physical system, male and female, has its own special strengths in developing our realizations. The female, which is the form that Princess Yeshe Dawa chose, manifests the absolute open and spacious nature of mind, which we can call the Great Mother. One of the characteristics of a fully enlightened being is the capacity for enlightened activity. And Tara's myriad enlightened activities include, on the relative level, conferring longevity, curing illnesses, stopping wars, and giving prosperity. And at the ultimate level, she confers all of the wisdoms and aspects of realization of ultimate reality. Even though there is this origin story of Tara, of, she's a princess that became a Buddha, in her Buddhahood, in that level of absolute truth, she's beyond just a simple story of a princess becoming a Buddha. That is one way to look at Tara at her relative level. But at the level of absolute truth, Tara is beyond understanding through conceptual thought or analysis. Her true nature is free from mental fabrications, such as the relative concepts of space and time. Of course, it's very difficult to explain or understand something beyond concepts. How do you describe the indescribable? Khenpo Palden Sherab says that in speaking of Tara as the Great Mother or the Wisdom Dakini, the great masters are attempting to guide us towards realization of the non-conceptual Tara. So the Great Mother has several titles. She's called Mother of all the Buddhas. She's called Mother of all samsara and nirvana, and she is central to the Buddha's teachings. At all levels, from the Hinayana up through the Vajrayana, Buddha Shakyamuni used the language of the Great Mother to explain the ultimate true nature. In fact, at their core, all of the teachings of the Buddhas are none other than explanations of the nature of the Great Mother. And Khenpo Palden Sherab says, the ultimate nature is correctly described as our true mother, because she is that which gives birth to and develops our own enlightened mind. For a long time, our obscured minds have been distanced from our original nature. Therefore, we wander in samsara, lost and confused. Buddha is the one who really points out the way back home and reintroduces us to our own true mother. If, in that moment, we can jump right into her lap without any fear, we'll reach the highest joy, peace, and realization, the security of the enlightened state. Until now, we have been distracted and separated from the recognition of absolute reality, the mother true nature. Through the Buddha's teachings, we are able to learn how to reconnect to our original state, where we will find enjoyment, relaxation, and freedom from confusion. To provide this opportunity for beings to reconnect with their true nature, the Great Mother appears in many, many forms. She emanates in many different Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya forms. The Khenpo Palden Sherab says, because her nature is ultimately non-dual, Tara's emanations are confined by no boundaries. They go beyond limitations such as geography, tradition, custom, and intellectual or social systems. All of these are dualistic conceptions created by people's mind in relative truth, while Tara resides beyond all such conceptions. She emanates as needed in her various forms, reaching out to every living sentient being everywhere. Her purpose is to help all living beings, not only selected groups. Thus, she aids every type of being, including animals and the beings of other realms, whether or not we can see them. So what does Tara look like? If you've ever seen the movie Pretty Woman, you know Richard Gere plays this rich guy named Edward, and he picks up a hooker named Vivian, who's played by Julia Roberts. And as near the beginning of the movie, he picks her up and they're driving in his fancy sports car, and he asks her, "What's your name?" And she says, "What do you want it to be?" And I think Tara kind of responds like that too. How do you want her to appear? How do you need her to appear? She'll be that. She'll be that for you. She appears in whatever form necessary to help beings connect with their true nature. She will appear as a goddess, a leper, or a whore. As long as it will connect beings with their true nature, she will appear in that form. For human beings, Tara emanates in a human form like ours. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. Her features are familiar to us. If she's appearing in an animal realm, she would appear in a way that would work for the animal she's appearing to. If she's appearing in the God realm, she would appear in an appropriate manner for them. Wherever she appears, she's going to take on a form that will work for the beings that she's working with. And so when we see, as humans, when we see depictions of Tara, she's always depicted in human form. But she's beyond conception, so she's beyond being one particular way or another. Her traditional costume and adornment, as we see it in tankas, I don't know if you can kind of see behind me up here. This is an image of white Tara up here. So you can see her traditional clothes and adornment there. She is dressed very similar to what human beings of the ruling classes wore in ancient India. It's not that she emanated that way because she likes that particular look, but it was to make it easy for human beings to connect with her so she could bring us to enlightenment. So nowadays, she might appear in a bikini or blue jeans or a Valentino gown, whatever will benefit beings. Khenpo Palden Sherab says, because Tara abides beyond boundaries and limitations, we cannot exactly say where Tara is and where she is not. Tara is readily available to every living being everywhere. So as I said, Tara has so many emanations. And her Sambhogakaya emanations include Vajravarahi, Vajrayogini, the 5 Mother Dhyani Buddhas, and the 5 Wisdom Dakinis. And her Nirmanakaya emanations include the 21 emanations of Tara, plus many more emanations of Tara in all sorts of different colors. It's green Tara, white Tara. This is white Tara here is one of those 21 emanations. There's also green Tara, red Tara, many other colors. In India, Tara's famous emanations include the Wisdom Dakinis Mandarava and Niguma, and in Tibet, the Wisdom Dakinis Yeshe Sogyal and Machaglabdron. Khenpo Palden Sherab says that Tara has so many emanations, we cannot even begin to grasp them with the conceptual mind. He says, not all of Tara's emanations have been widely recognized or renowned. Some are very humble, anonymous persons, and others are not so much persons as very subtle energies. Connecting with any one of these emanations through practice can remove our fears, obscurations, and obstacles, helping us develop the ability to benefit all beings and assisting us in reaching enlightenment. So, one emanation of Tara is Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo, the first Western woman to be recognized as a reincarnate Lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and the founder and spiritual director of KPC. So in a previous life, around the end of the 17th century, she was Genyenma Ahkon Lhamo, the younger sister of Rigzen Kunzang Sherab, and together they founded the Payul lineage. And when she was born, she had miraculous signs. And then, she, along with her brother, they studied with many of the great masters and Mahasiddhas at the time. And she mastered the sutras and tantras, and then wandered, going from sacred place to sacred place and practicing with perfect concentration, practicing. And she had amazing visions of the deities, and who conferred many blessings and teachings to her directly. And she resided on the hill to the east of the Payul temple, where she constantly taught the Dharma to her disciples. And gradually it became a nunnery. And the place was so filled with so many nuns in their maroon robes that it looked almost like an anthill. So it became known as the Upper Red Village. And Genyenma Ahkon Lhamo cared for and benefited countless beings. And many of her followers became great scholars and accomplished practitioners. And at the end of her life, when she saw that at the end of her compassionate activities of that life were coming to an end, then she attained the state of Dharma Dhatu. And when her holy body was cremated, the top part of her skull flew up in the sky and landed on the throne of her brother, Rigzen Kunzang Sherab, the throne where he would give teachings. And not only that, but the skull was found to be miraculously emblazoned with the sacred syllable Ah. And this skull, called a Kapala, became one of the most sacred relics of the Payul lineage. And it was used during ceremonies to invoke the blessings of the Buddhas. His Holiness Rinpoche made wishing prayers. He would use this Kapala in the ceremonies, and he made wishing prayers to meet this Dakini if her incarnation was still alive in the world, or if she was alive today in the world. During the Cultural Revolution, the skull was pulverized, unfortunately. Most of it was destroyed, but a Tibetan man managed to save the silver dollar-sized piece on which the syllable Ah appears. And in 1987, in Tibet, this piece was returned to His Holiness Panna Rinpoche, who had it preserved in a crystal lotus and presented it to Jetsunma just prior to the occasion of her enthronement ceremony in 1988 at the temple at the KPC temple in Maryland. So this Kapala relic remains at KPC, and there's an altar in our prayer room called the Kapala altar, and the altar and the Kapala is displayed on auspicious days. On the other days, the altar is kept closed. It's a very sacred relic, and so it's only displayed on the most auspicious days. So Genyenma Ahkon Lhamo's story is absolutely incredible and inspiring. In many ways, it's a fairly her life story, the way that she worked in comparison to the way that her brother Rigzin Kunzang Sherab worked. It's a very good illustration of the difference between like the male and female lineages in Tibetan Buddhism. Rigzin Kunzang Sherab taught from a throne. We know that, her skull, she's practicing in a cave on a hillside, and when she's cremated, her skull flies to the throne of her brother. So she wasn't teaching from a throne, her brother was. Does that mean that she was any less than him? No. There are two different ways of spreading the Dharma and of connecting with beings. So Jetsunma says, for instance, that in talking about why do you mostly see male lamas, male throne holders, male lineage holders in Tibetan Buddhism? Why is it? Why is it that the males are more prominent? And she says that the tradition of the Dakinis, or chondros, is very different. Dakini means like sky goer, someone who dances freely in the space of wisdom. So the Dakinis, or the chondros, their tradition is different. It was their tradition to wander. And they wandered from place to place and stayed and stopped wherever it moved them. And wherever they felt it was time to stay and stop, they would stay there and practice for a year or 2 years or 10 years or 20 years. Some of them stayed in the same place for all of their lives, but for the most part, many of these Dakinis were wanderers. They would go from one cave to another, and they would practice for years and years and years and years. And they had students, but not, in comparison, you have a male teacher who sits in a throne in a temple or a monastery, and the students that are there are kind of in one place. And there's a central place there. And then while the females are wandering and their students follow them. So these Dakinis, many of them could not read, but they would stay and practice, and they would develop miraculous powers and miraculous abilities to teach naturally and spontaneously. And it was not uncommon for students to follow them around and sit in front or near the cave where they were practicing to be sure that they had everything they needed, that they had food and food and water and anything else that they needed. And these students might wait for 4 or 5 years for one appearance. They would camp and stay within a valley, knowing that the Dakini was up there. And every now and then she would come out and do something with them. And they would just wait. And their students were not only female. They might have had more females than males, but the females were not the ones that practiced as much. In Tibet, it was a subservient culture, and the idea was more to have children. And again, most of the women could not read. Most of the education of the what's the word I'm looking for? Most of the reading and writing education happened in the monasteries, and so this was more of a spoken tradition with the Dakinis. The tradition. Jetsunma says, the tradition is that the Dakinis are not spoken of as loudly or as often as the male lamas are. The reason why that is so is just because of the nature of their teaching. They preferred not. Their teaching, their transmissions were natural and spontaneous and were not recorded in books. Rarely did they record in books what their teachings were, although it has been done, I understand, and there are female tertons, but they preferred their privacy. They wanted to be alone. And when they came out to teach is when they chose to come out and teach. They did not wish to be pinned down. And it was the students' job to wait. And she says that when these Dakinis did come out, their teaching was very different from that of the Lama, of the male Lama. They gave a form of transmission, but it was a natural transmission, and it happened in an indescribable way. It happened from the sound of their voice and from being in their presence. It was a natural empowerment and transmission. They claimed no lineage. So the male lamas would give the wongs or the empowerments, and it was rare for women to give these empowerment ceremonies in order to pass these transmissions on. The Dakinis themselves left no lineage, and that is why they are not written about or talked about or traced back in the same way that that male lineage is. The Dakinis, they came and went, they lived and died, and there's very little record of them. But their names are known, and local people know their histories. So if you go to a place where there is, a place where a Dakini has lived and practiced, and you ask the local people for that history, it is still there. For instance, when Gyaltsen Rinpoche, who is the modern day incarnation of Rigzin Kunzang Sherab, when he went back, he learned all kinds of things about Ahkon Lhamo, about Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. And they still remember because the descendants of her students are still there. Jetsunma says that Dakinis are known for ripening karma. In fact, Dakinis are known to be the holders of the fruition of karma. They are known to be the holders of the suffering and punishment actually associated with negative karma. They're the holders of negative karma. And it's often, you'll hear people talk about maybe doing something bad and incurring the wrath of the Dakinis. And that's because they're the holders of this fruition of karma. And they help us work with that karma. They help us work through it. But there is a difference in the way that the Dakinis and the male lamas work. And it's important to recognize that they appear differently in the world. In order to work with the needs of sentient beings, because there are so many sentient beings with so many different needs, and so they require many different ways of working with them. So when we think, why are there more male throne holders? Why are there more males being in this particular way? And why are we not see women in this particular way? And it might be just, it's basically because they work in different ways. There's just different ways of working. Male and female embodiments of enlightened energy appear differently in the world and work with their students in different ways. And so it's not like Tibetan Buddhism is misogynistic in that it mostly has males sitting on the thrones. That's not it. It's a recognition of and an appreciation of the multitude of ways in which enlightened energy is embodied in many different forms in the world, working with students in however they need. So the Dakini is an object of refuge that is, so they're different. The Dakini and the Lama act in different ways, but the Dakini is an object of refuge and is known to be non-dual with the Lama. The mandala of the Dakini is the mandala of enlightenment, and the Dakini is considered to be the very activity of all of the Buddhas. The Dakini works naturally and spontaneously. Karma is ripened, and with faith, this karma is ripened in a way that leads to enlightenment. The Dakini works through activity in order to help students ripen that karma in a way that leads to enlightenment. So the function of the Dakini is to ripen, and Jetsunma says, the function of the Dakini is to ripen and bring forth to the forefront the appropriate karma so that enlightenment can be reached. So when we see the Dakini, and sometimes you see the Dakini in more peaceful aspects, like this image of Tara here, who is very peaceful and approachable. And then sometimes you see her in a more formidable state, such as her appearance as Dorje Pagmo, And and that the depiction of the Dakini is kind of fearsome, usually. So the Dakini traditionally holds in her hand the driguk, which is a curved knife that cuts away ignorance and cuts away the karma of hatred, greed, and ignorance. And she also often holds the trident, which spears and catches hatred, greed, and ignorance, and picks it from the mind stream, kind of spears it out of the mind stream like a fish. And she often holds the cup, the kapala, filled with blood, which is the realization of primordial wisdom, understanding that form and formless are one, and that all things have the same taste, both celestial food and blood and guts. They're all the same. And Jetsunma says, it is that awareness of understanding all things to have the same taste and not making the distinction between good and bad, good and evil, high and low, this and that, but understanding the nature of all phenomena. These are the activities of the Dakini. So there's different activities that one, there's different activities in the spiritual path, depending on if you are in the mandala of a Dakini or in the mandala of a male lama. So for instance, in the mandala of a traditional lama, to practice with a traditional male lama, the first practice is Nundro, which is the preliminary practices. And in practicing with the Dakini, the first practice is devotion. And that devotion is shown through acts. Building an altar, tearing it down, building another altar, tearing it down, building temples, building stupas, building schools, building retreat places, lots and lots of activity, putting in 110 hours a day. And all these things require a level of compassion and heart commitment beyond the ordinary capabilities of human beings. It pushes you past your limits, past your conceptual limits of what is possible and what you can do, and what you should do for others. You kind of have this idea of how much is okay to give of yourself to others. And Dakinis are going to blow you right past that limit. They're gonna take you past that to the understanding of what it truly means to exchange oneself for others and to really go beyond your own comfort, to get rid of your own, just get past that idea of your own comfort. And these things are the Nundrel of the Dakini. These are the preliminary practices that are required, and they take their form in activity. So Jetsunma, for instance, she has her students do the traditional Nundrel, and she also is always got some massive amounts of activity going on in her mandala. There is so much to do, so many things to build or create, or to build up, tear down, change, and that is also a Nundrel. And so Jetsunma says, through traditional Nundrel, the 5 senses are purified through the 5 different activities of Nundrel. Through the Dakini's Nundrel of activity, the 5 senses are purified through the activities of Nundrel. Through the activities associated with traditional Nundrel and the teachings of the traditional male lama, hatred, greed, and ignorance will be rooted out of the mind stream. They'll be forced out of the mind stream through the purification of practicing the 3 roots, of practicing the yidams, and of generating the mantra. In the mandala of the Khandrel, or Dakini, hatred, greed, and ignorance will be flushed out naturally through the ripening of your karma as you are in that mandala. Through your activity, you will find out how much hatred you have. You will find out how greedy you are, how slothful, how unwilling to love. You will find out, and then they'll be cut with a knife. So there are these different ways that the male lamas and the Dakinis teach their students and help their students connect with their true nature. But in their essence, the lama and the Dakini are non-dual. They're absolutely non-dual. So this is why I really feel like it is important to not be closed-minded about the way that teachers appear in the world, and about the way that female teachers appear, because they have not traditionally appeared in the same way that male lamas have, and that's okay. That's okay. It's the way that it is. So Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo, her life story is, I mean, it is kind of the epitome of this traditional representation of the Dakini, who is wandering and practicing, and who then students come and students gather around her and follow her, and that she's practicing in a cave. She's not on a throne; she's in a cave, and just really engaged in practice for the majority of her life. That is a very traditional story of a Dakini. And for another thing, she was Tibetan, which is another very, I think it's easier to see female teachers who are these historical female teachers, the ones that we do know about. They're Tibetan or they're Indian. It's a little bit easier to conceive of them because that matches with our conceptual ideas of how women in Buddhism can appear, and shows our racism that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing Buddhas depicted with Asian faces. Because historically, Buddhism has been in Asian countries, and so they depicted the Buddhas in these ways. That does not mean that Tara is Tibetan, or that Tara is Indian, or that Tara is Nepali. Tara is beyond the conceptualizations of race or class or gender or any of that. She's beyond that. And we have to be prepared for our teachers to also appear in ways that will break us out of our limited conceptual ideas of what enlightenment looks like. So for instance, the modern day Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo was born in a Jewish Italian family in Brooklyn, New York. She's been known to wear leather jackets, gold hoop earrings, and red acrylic nails. And people have really given her a hard time for that too. Americans, should be said, have given her a really hard time for that. If you met her in the 1970s, you might have known her as your child's kindergarten art teacher. That's what she was doing in the 70s, teaching art classes for kindergartners. She had long hair, that long 70s hair down to the back of her knees, which she ironed, old style ironing hair on your ironing board. Maybe you wouldn't expect to meet the Buddha looking like that. If you met her in the 1980s, she might have sold you a bra at the JCPenney's. That's what she was doing in the 80s. She was working in a department store and raising 2 teenage boys. So if you were looking for a traditional depiction of Tara in the Royal Indian Finery, you would have walked right past her. So if we are closed-minded about what a Buddha can look like or how the Great Mother can appear, we may miss out on the blessings and opportunities that are all around us. Recently, Jetsunma has erected a statue of Lady Liberty on the grounds of KPC's Maryland Temple. And this is another example of something that may seem very non-traditional. But as we already know, Tara can appear in myriad ways, in any way that will connect a being with their true nature. And Tara can even manifest as subtle energies. So there's just so many ways that Tara can appear. So now we have this Lady Liberty statue on the grounds of KPC. And Jetsunma has said that Lady Liberty is Dakini spirit. She says that Lady Liberty is our goddess, the American goddess, that she is us. And at this particular time, she should be deeply honored. And she has asked her students to show a sign of respect whenever they pass Lady Liberty. And she has even said that we can pray to her. And this may sound unconventional, but again, remember that Tara is not bound by the same conceptual limitations that we are. The Statue of Liberty represents freedom and equality and safe harbor. She doesn't stand still, but is moving forward, breaking the chains that bind her feet, breaking the chains that hold us in suffering, the bondage of slavery, the bondage of conceptual thought, really. She epitomizes the Mahayana practice of meditating on the equality of beings and exchanging oneself for others. Jetsunma says that, the Emma Lazarus's poem that is on the Statue of Liberty. So Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty, Jetsunma has said that poem is a true Mahayana prayer. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. So that is a true Mahayana prayer. So there's so much more to cover regarding the nature of the Dakini and the ways that Dakinis operate in the world, and really too much for one class. But I hope that this class will help you to have an open mind as to the myriad ways in which Dakinis can appear in the world in order to help beings connect with their own true nature, the Great Mother. And I hope also that you will remember that the Great Mother is always with us and that she is everywhere. She is our true nature. And when we have pure view, with pure view, we would actually see all men as Dakas and all women as Dakinis. So we're not there yet. We still have a lot of obscurations, a lot of hatred, greed, and ignorance that conceals from us the true nature, not only of our own true nature, but the true nature of others. And hopefully, if we can be more open-minded as to the ways that that enlightened energy can be embodied in the world and can appear, and we can be more accepting of that, then we will more readily receive those blessings. So I hope you will join us tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live for the Yumka Sok and the ceremony empowering the new Lady Liberty statue at our Maryland temple. And Lady Liberty will now join all of the other beautiful embodiments of wisdom mind that grace the KPC's grounds. And I hope also that you will come in person and visit her at some point. Maybe not tomorrow, but in the future, I hope that you will at some point come and see her and make offerings to her, because Jetsunma has said she is very important to uphold at this time. And I think, in thinking of the Dakini, the mandala, the activity mandala of the Dakini, and how the Dakini asks us to go beyond our own comfort and to really, really work for the benefit of others in ways that may make us uncomfortable. I think Lady Liberty really epitomizes that too, because she asks us to take in, she is a call to action to receive the stranger, to receive whoever needs help, whoever is, the homeless, the tempest-tossed, to invite them in and care for them, and to offer safe refuge to all beings without distinction. And Jetsunma says also that her message is that, in our diversity, we are one. She represents our diversity and that we are one. So I hope that you'll remember that and come visit Lady Liberty. And in closing, Khenpo Palden Cherub says, knowing Tara's purpose, we will develop strong feelings of joy, happiness, and closeness at the prospect of connecting to Mother Tara. It is said that Mother Tara's hook of compassion is always ready. We must have our mind and heart in a state of readiness, which is the ring of devotion. It's that ring of devotion so that the hook can hook it, So we will aspire to follow Tara's example ourselves by working for all living beings with love, compassion, courage, and commitment. And so with that, let's say the dedication prayer. This is on the last page of the opening prayers packet. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms. Thank you.